In the message, Ta-Nehisi writes that it is never enough for the reader of your words to be convinced. The goal, he says, is to haunt, to have them think about your words before bed, see them manifest in your dreams, tell your partner about them the next morning, and grab random people on the street, shake them and say, "Have you read this?" I think about that proposition that writing should haunt quite regularly, because the best ideas find us in the middle of something else and refuse to let us return to what we were doing before. That's exactly what happened when I encountered the work of today's guest. Welcome to Read Between the Covers. I'm your host, Mvundong Pepuka, and today we're thinking out loud together about African cinema, ancestral cosmologies, and what it means to reclaim something that was never supposed to be returned to us. My guest today is Cherise Lowe, South African scholar, creative practitioner, visiting fellow at the Center for Socio-Digital Futures. She's a lecturer and she is currently completing her PhD at Stellenbosch University, and her works moves between African film, new materialism, indigenous epistemologies, and embodied practice. Cherise, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It is an absolute joy to be here.
It makes me really happy to hear that, and I'm glad that you're here. All right, so most scholars often arrive at their research questions through a combination of intellectual curiosity and something personal, something that wouldn't leave them alone. Your work sits at a very interesting intersection, African film, new materialism, indigenous epistemologies. So I wanted to ask you not just what brought you there, but what wouldn't let you go? What question, what image, what experience kept returning to you until you had no choice but to follow it?
So I feel like there's some kind of soul connection between us, because I used that exact phrase. I was at this fellowship last year, June, in Bristol at the Center for Socio-Digital Futures, and I said to them, I just don't know why zombies won't leave me alone. So I used the same phrase as it just wouldn't let me go. But I think this whole thing, I mean, what's in a name? I was named after a Hollywood golden era actress, Sid Charisse. That's where my name comes from.
Okay.
And I was raised by a movie-loving family. And so movies are very dear to me and have always been. And I was raised during apartheid in South Africa. And what would happen is the dining room table would be surrounded by people having these really strident political conversations. And it would be very tense. And then I would go seek refuge in my granny's bedroom and just watch these golden era Hollywood musicals for some sanctuary and sort of escapism. I was just talking to students today about the most escapist genre being musicals. So it kind of started as like this refuge for me and this other way of being in the world that felt a little bit kinder than the reality of growing up in South Africa at that time. And then this specific project was born out of terrible grief. So I lost a whole host of very dear people about 10 years ago. And it was all within the span of a year, and it was just devastating. And I honestly didn't know how to be here anymore. And then I sat in on a colleague's course on new materialisms, and it was an epiphany, because it brought together so many things that I'd felt and loved in my life. And I realized I could talk about them within the academy. So, and then I'd been teaching this course on African film and African media, and I'd seen how it had really kind of moved the students. And I thought, there's something here that's worth exploring in a different light. And then, of course, the more I went into new materialisms, the more I realized there's nothing new about them. Indigenous ways of knowing, we've always known these things. We just have different language, fancier words now, more scientific. So I just had to kind of bring them all together. And then the zombie thing, it's funny, I'm not the big zombie lover around here. That's my husband.
Okay.
I'm quite a fragile flower, and I'm not a huge fan of like horror and gore, and I feel it very deeply.
Gruesome imagery.
But then bizarrely, I mean, last year I got embroiled in this whole kind of development project for a zombie show, which is still in development. And just it, like I say, they wouldn't leave me alone. And so out of that has come these interesting ways of thinking that I think are maybe helpful, and not just, as my husband would say, mental masturbation.
Oh, wow.
So I hope that kind of covers it. Movies as medicine, movies as refuge. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's absolutely powerful. That's absolutely powerful. And I was about to ask you, because you talked about your formation and, you know, how you fell in love with cinemas and how they were a form of escapism for you. And I know that your background is also quite interesting. You spent some time doing humanitarian work in Afghanistan, and I could imagine what working in that particular environment or that acute crisis would do and how it would change your frame of reference. So in terms of your formation as well, I'm curious to know what that experience did to your epistemology.
Yeah. So I'm not someone who was unaware of suffering in the world. But I guess when you're really involved in humanitarian work, you're keenly aware of the realities of displacement and also how the systems of aid kind of work and how complicated that whole scenario is. So then knowledge isn't abstract anymore. It's not this kind of elegant ivory tower thing. It's very much affecting access to safety, food, care, like our human rights, our dignity. So lived experience is very central, both in feminist new materialisms and indigenous ways of knowing. It's about your emplaced and situated knowledge, as Donna Haraway would say. So it really, that kind of experience definitely pushes you more towards that kind of accountable, relational way of being here. So, and it definitely sharpened the interest I already had in who is seen, who is counted. I think of McKittrick's, Black mathematics. How do we count and how do we narrate and who gets helped and how, and, all those power dynamics, who's ignored and abandoned. And so I've always been very attentive to these kind of ideas. And I think Afghanistan just really made it very clear that knowledge has real world consequences. It's not something abstract. It's something that's really shaping our world. Yeah.
That is indeed powerful. That is indeed powerful.
Yeah.
And, in the message, Ta-Nehisi quotes speaks about whose story gets to be told, right? And whose perspective gets deemed valid and invalid. And I think that that's particularly very important. And you spoke about relationality, right? And that's an idea that I also have been pondering quite recently. And I came across Natalie Diaz's work and the image of the circumpunct, the circle surrounding the dot, and the significance of what that means. And at that moment in time, I caught myself and I thought, you know what? If I do some self-introspection, I realize that I'm living from the dot. I'm living from that egotistical centered self. And it feels like it's a forgotten indigenous epistemology.
Absolutely. What a profound realization. And it's something that, there's something from the Tao. The Tao, I think they say, put yourself in the center, but then forget that you're there. So, of course, we are experiencing world from this first person POV. How can we not? We are bounded individuals. But of course, relational cosmologies have always challenged that, as you say. They've always challenged this idea of the isolated, extractive subject, which is what neoliberalism is all about, is about entrenching that and co-opting everything, including indigenous ways of knowing, to serve that goal of further extraction. So I think we have to also be careful of using the word medicine, because again, I think indigenous cosmologies shouldn't be another resource to be mined, to try and now cure the ills of this world that we've created. So I think their value lies in these kind of very disciplined ways of thinking through relation, through reciprocity. I mean, I have next to me Robin Wool Kimmerer's The Service Berry, and this, you probably know her Braiding Sweetgrass, which is
Mhm,
about this gift economy that is the
mhm,
reality of being on this planet,
mhm,
versus the capitalist machine.
mhm,
So, yeah, this kind of centering of the land, of ancestry, and of the more than human world that we
mhm,
depend on. So I think a concept that I've really loved in my research
mhm.
is a Basutu concept.
Oh,
And now, of course, I'm leaning on other people's research. Martin Przeski has done some work on Sesotho ethical leadership, because I
mhm.
love this concept of Sariti is what I want to talk about.
Okay.
Um, and and basically, it's translated into English as both shadow
Mhm.
and light, like aura,
Whoa, what a
so it
contradiction! But
contains this duality, which is
yeah.
very strange for the Western mind that likes to
Mhm.
think in binaries. It's like, well,
Yes,
which one is
it's
it? Is
well,
it the
it's
shadow or the
meta-modern. It's
light?
not postmodern or modern. It's meta-modern. So yes.
Yes. Yes, so it's
Yeah.
moving beyond these kind of dualities that have caused us so much violence.
Mhm.
So it's calling for this dignity. And then there's this beautiful work done on like King Moshoeshoe the First's his leadership as an example of the Sariti, because his authority was very relational. He gathered people, he made refuge, he sought consensus, practiced restraint. I mean, these are not qualities that we are seeing
Mhm.
in leadership
At
in
all.
at the moment
We're seeing quite the opposite.
anywhere. I mean, I feel like the great crisis of the current moment is a crisis of leadership.
Mm,
And so, this beautiful notion of the light, I mean, it
mm,
reminds me also of Deborah Bird Rose from the Feminist New Materialists, writing about Australian Aboriginal knowledge of the shimmer, which I think shimmer is, again, a way of talking about Sariti. So, this is not to
mhm.
flatten all these indigenous ways of knowing into one sort of
Into
amorphous
one.
mass. I mean, I want to honor that
Mhm.
there obviously are differences. And again, I'm also cautious about speaking about other cultures that I myself am outside of. But I just find it
Mhm.
so moving that there
Mhm.
is a way to be here. So, in relation to the circumpunct, I love this concept. It kind of Sariti helps me to think about the dot and the circle together. So
Mhm.
a leader isn't a sovereign dot that's projecting this power outward. A real
Mhm.
leader is made by the circle, and that circle contains the ancestors, it contains the land, memory,
Mm.
obligation, obviously the people that you are leading, like all of that and more. So I feel like
Wow.
Sariti is this kind of ethical shadow that you can cast that is larger than your ego. And wouldn't that
Mm.
be a beautiful thing to see in the leadership of the world?
That would be
I pray for
incredibly
this
beautiful.
day. Yeah,
That would be
yeah,
incredibly beautiful. Oh wow.
yeah. So I mean, I think these cosmologies, they kind of they understand that the more than human and the human have always been an interdependent field. I think that's something that they share, and
Mhm.
that this isn't some kind of like sort of la la land of sort of harmonious purity. It's also conflict, and
Yeah.
it's very much about responsibility. It's very much about obligation.
Mhm.
So as I've said, I'm indebted to thinkers like Robin Wall Kimmerer, but also African thinkers like Malidoma Patrice Somé. I love his work, and I'm completely obsessed with Bayo Kumalafe. So
Oh.
he talks about post-activism and onto-fugitivity, and every word out of his mouth is nectar. It's just balm for the days we're living through, and he's very active online, so it's quite easy to get a hold of his beautiful teachings. So
Wow.
I think the question at the heart of these Indigenous ways of knowing is, what do we owe the relations that make our lives possible?
Yes.
So it's quite a demanding thing. It's not this kind of sentimental, abstract fairy tale. It's very much a lived relational practice. Yeah.
That is very powerful. And the question would be, or rather not the question, but the difficult task would be how we embody that, because we see how some of these indigenous cosmologies, for example, something similar like Ubuntu, I am because you are, is invoked almost ceremoniously and almost becomes devout of meaning, because we don't necessarily apply it, but we invoke it. Yeah.
Yes, to really live that. I mean, let's think about that. It requires the undoing of all these structures that have been put in place to just, me before you, and how to get, climbing that ladder and accumulating more and more. And it's just, we see where that's got us. It's not a pretty place. And I think, we know how people are suffering in so many ways. And it's because of that wrong-headedness. We've lost touch with the reality of our being here, which is a relational experience. We're in a relational field.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful. And you mentioned something interesting over the weekend, that today you were hosting a lecture under the theme of archive and afterlives.
Afterlives, yes.
And when we think about, the indigenous knowledge and indigenous cosmologies, I was wondering, because I'm not well versed in the realm of African cinema, but is African cinema a kind of archive where these indigenous epistemologies are stored? And if so, what does that mean for us who've never thought to look there?
So I can highly recommend a film for you. Okay. It's called, I don't know, you might have seen it already, Milisutando. It's the most extraordinary film. It's like a combination of personal essay, but also all of this archival footage that she's dredged up and put together in the most creative, moving way. So she's reflecting on growing up in what was then the Transkei, and the sort of the party line, the kind of the narrative around how these homelands were going to be a good thing. And then the conflicted feelings that she has, having grown up there, then left, and now living now, and what it all means. So the archives are not a kind of, I was just troubling it with my undergrad students today. They're not this neutral space. They're not out there. They're not this like static kind of storehouse. They're very much a living thing. And yes, African cinema can work as a counter archive, which is what I really enjoy about it. So
counter archive.
Yes. So it kind of counters the hegemonic narrative. It can. I'm not saying all of it, because of course there are many things that constitute African cinema, but the ones I'm interested in, the ones I'm writing about, I feel like they have so much to share. So for example, I'm busy with my monograph. So one of my chapters is Mattie Diop's work. So she did Atlantics, which is just phenomenal. She's Senegalese, so a group of boys don't get paid for working on this like dystopian Afrofuturist skyrise. So they take to the seas to go look for, better prospects elsewhere, back to the, the heart of the colonizers, and they disappear at sea. And then the girls they left behind become haunted with their spirits, specifically looking for reparations. So, I mean, her work, she's got a new film too that I adore called Dahomey, about the repatriation of these kind of sacred objects back to Africa. And she just uses the ocean as this, like, it reminds me of the work of Christina Sharp. Do you know her beautiful work, In the Wake?
In the Wake.
Oh my God, so gorgeous. And she's got a new book that's also beautiful. But yeah, like this idea, and I guess she's calling on Brathwaite's work of tide electrics,
Hmm.
where, nothing's ever past. We live in the wake, and it moves through us, and it
Hmm.
sediments, and yeah. So I found it's interesting because I didn't even realize it at the time. But the films I chose, Atlantics, Njoni's work, I'm Not a Witch, and On Becoming Guinea Fowl, Neptune Frost by Saul Williams and
Hmm.
Anicio Zeman. This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection by Masesi. They
Hmm.
all are films about grief, and I hadn't fully
Mm.
realized it
Wow.
until I was at that proposal phase.
Where you were like, oh, wait. There's a reason
And
why I
I realized,
gravitated towards all of
oh,
these.
I see what's happening here is
Yeah.
I'm looking at the terrible grief.
Mm.
And it obviously there was terrible grief in my own personal life that probably drew me to those films. But there's a
Hmm.
grief that we're all experiencing in this great extinction event because of climate change. These terrible genocides that we're seeing live streamed on our
Yes.
phones day and night.
Mhm.
Um, you know, there's a lot of grief, and
There is.
and I think these films help us be with it. They help us process it um, by looking at these archives of patriarchal violence, colonial violence, this hauntology,
Hmm.
this presence of violence in our lives,
Hmm.
including the violence on the earth, of course. The mineral extraction, the digital systems
Hmm.
themselves are quite violent. The data extraction, which there's such interesting research done on how that affects Africa specifically. All thanks to Kajetan Iheke's African Ecomedia, which I didn't even know about when I was
Oh, wow.
putting my proposal together, which is very grounded in the mineral, which is what he's doing in his beautiful work as well.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I think the archives, obviously, what is fascinating to me is how they tap into memory
Hmm.
and how these stories kind of create our reality.
Mm.
Um, what is it that we are struggling politically, emotionally? Um, yeah, so I think African cinema is a very interesting living archive of what like official accounts of so-called history, because nothing is
Hmm.
past,
Hmm.
they can't often hold that.
Mm.
And it's definitely, I've just seen how affective it is, like, how it moves my students and and opens them up to being here. I mean, today's lecture was difficult because we were specifically looking at apartheid era um, materials. And
Hmm.
as a white woman of a certain age, it burns, it just burns. But then afterwards, I had some of these beautiful young people who were blessed not to grow up during that. But of course, we all live in the wake.
In the wake of it.
Yeah, they came up
Mm.
to me and they just said, "Thank you so much. This is really helping me to think about this." Because they all kind of roll their eyes when you bring up apartheid, because
Hmm.
it's just like, oh, that again. But actually,
Oh, wow.
yes,
I'm
that is
actually
the
surprised
wound
that
that
they
we are
hold that
living.
kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're living inside the wound. We can't ignore it. But we have to learn how to be with it in a way that's going to be helping us to navigate the mess that we find ourselves in. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That is absolutely profound. And I wanted to ask about the contrast because you spoke about the power that African film or cinema has, and I wanted to contrast it with Western cinema. And I
Mhm.
know that you have some background in that as well. Um,
Yes. Yes, I
so,
worked in the film industry in Hollywood once upon a time.
would you look at that? Would you look at that? Now you're
My
exploring
claim to
African
fame is
film.
that my claim to fame is that I was on the development team of Fight Club.
Oh, wow.
And
an
as
incredible
people
claim,
have said to me previously, you should lead with that.
Definitely. So when we look at both of those mediums, the Western and the African, and we look at, for instance, the image that you invoke that haunts you so much, the zombie. Um, in the Western sense, the zombie is a metaphor for conformity and mindlessness, and we see these, gruesome monsters that are just mindlessly walking around. And the threat comes from the zombie. The civilized society has to defend itself against it. But the African zombie, rooted in Haitian voodoo and Western African traditions, inverts that horror.
Yeah.
And the horror is not what the zombie does, but what was actually done to the zombie, the theft of the soul, the extraction of the will and selfhood from the body. What does that inversion reveal about the two traditions? What does that tell us?
So interesting. I mean, I was listening to a Haitian voodoo, is she a high priestess? I forget what the correct terminology is, but, a practitioner. And she was saying, in the West, we're afraid of zombies, but within the tradition, the fear is of becoming zombie, because the Afro-diasporic zombie, as you say, is shifting that horror from the monster to the system that's actually stole your agency.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, so in Western popular culture, you have this long tradition. I mean, actually, so interesting. There was a film that I really loved in film school many years ago called I Walked with a Zombie, which is like a B movie horror. And it's set in the Caribbean on a sugar plantation. And the sugar plantation owner's wife has something wrong with her. She's become like a sleepwalker.
Oh, wow.
And so this nurse is sent from Canada to kind of look after her. And then she starts chatting to the local people, and they say, we kind of know what's up with her. So they invite her into their voodoo rituals. And apparently, ethnographically, it was all quite accurate, what was portrayed. Ethically, I'm not sure how to feel about that. But yeah, it's, I mean, so after that more accurate portrayal, it went more and more into this kind of horror vein of like contagion, horde, mindless kind of, and basically, I think it's very much about collapse, right? Like individual collapse, but also societal collapse. Yeah. Whereas in the Haitian and the Afro-diasporic, we see more that it's this figure of stolen will. So it's really shifting the question. How do we rather, in all of these many zombie iterations that we've seen, it's really about how do we defend ourselves from these monsters? But within this other context, it's more, what is the system that has produced this condition? So that's really helping us think about the plantationocene, about slavery and labor and colonialism and racial capitalism and digital extraction, all of these horrors. The zombie is this figure that kind of moves not in a straight line. What I've thought of it is like it's what refuses to die in us. So even as we become more and more zombified, and clicking and scrolling and endlessly doom scrolling, and we kind of feel ourselves, I know I have felt this, becoming drained of agency by the algorithm. So I've had my students keep algorithm diaries to become more and more aware of what is being shown, what is being hidden, what is being asked of them. So I think of Hortense Spiller's beautiful work, on enfleshment and the sort of ungendering captive body. She talks about it in terms of slavery and how bodies were stripped of their personhood. And I think that's what's interesting about the zombie in terms of the current moment, because I think it's kind of happening at maybe the largest scale ever, possibly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And that's very interesting. And it actually brings me to my next question, because we speak about a zombie as, this body that moves and labors, but whose agency and will has been extracted. And it relates to all the things that you mentioned, the condition that Achille Mbembe describes as brutalism, where
Yes.
a civilized condition where whole categories of people are rendered expandable. Um, and it also reminds me of necropolitics, the
Yes.
exercise of political power to determine who may live and who must die, or who must remain undead.
Yes.
But I want to bring in Calvin Warren here. And in Ontological Terror, he argues that the structure of being itself, as Western metaphysics has constituted it, requires blackness as its constitutive outside. So not excluded in the way that a marginalized group is excluded from a political community, where the remedy might be inclusion or recognition. Warren's claim is devastating, because he says that blackness is the function of nothingness that makes the category of the human possible in the first place. So
Sure.
the zombie presupposes that someone had a soul to steal to begin with, but
Right.
Warren insists that the structure never granted the soul in the first place. How do we resolve that within your zombie methodology?
So I don't think it magically bypasses the problem, but I think, a la Hortense Spillers, it offers another grammar of being. So basically, you're saying, or Warren's saying, that Western metaphysics positions blackness as nothingness.
As nothingness, yes.
And as outside of the human. So even obviously the concept of the human is problematized by new materialisms. It's about decentering the human. And I think of the work of like Sylvia Wynter, where she talks about man as like this over-represented genre of the human.
Yes.
And this Western human is not neutral, it's historically produced, it's very exclusionary. It's exactly what you're talking about here. So you're asking whether the zombie framework comes from an ontological elsewhere, and I think that's a yes and a no. So no, because Afro-diasporic traditions have also obviously been shaped by slavery, colonialism, racial violence, etc. So they're not these pure spaces outside of modernity. But yes, they also offer other grammars for thinking, being, personhood. And again, indigenous ways of knowing have such a different way of thinking soul, spirit, ancestry, relation, or even restoration. So I don't think the zombie can solve Warren's problem, but it can, as I was saying, they don't walk in straight lines. Yes. They can kind of like show us another route through it, this kind of zigzag, or those desire lines, that where people walk against the grain.
Yes.
So I think it does let us help us question this kind of stolen will, soul embodiment, and it's something more than what Western humanism can easily hold. So I think it is an important move. Yeah, so it's not escaping the wound by any means.
Okay.
But maybe changing how we can approach it. Maybe.
Okay.
I'm still thinking through it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I want to then bring it to the metaphysics, or bring it down from the metaphysical into the flesh, because if the zombie condition is structural, the question is, how do we heal from that, or what does that healing look like? So I know that you're deeply ingrained in the somatic practice, the breath, the movement, and is that where the digital zombie begins to reclaim its soul?
So you come straight back into my love language of love languages. So somatic practice is where it's at.
Okay, tell me more.
I just had my students read something so beautiful. It's called Rest, a Manifesto. Do you know it?
No, I
She
don't.
she runs a nap ministry. I love it.
A
So
nap
it's kind of,
ministry.
yeah, yeah. So I had them
Okay.
read it in counterpoint to Black Pentecostal Breath,
Hmm.
which is very kind of, black joy expression, all this sort of vibrancy. And then as the counterpoint, I had this like deep rest. Because really, one of the motivating ideas in all this work that I'm doing is Nima Gateri's concept of Afro-presentism.
Hmm.
And Bayo Akumalafi also talks about it. He says the times are urgent, so we need to slow down.
Mm.
So it's kind of coming back into the body and how this can really interrupt the capture, this
Hmm.
this that's kind of because extraction isn't only economic, it's also sensory and bodily,
Yes, 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 it is.
and these digital systems are constantly shaping everything, our attention, our posture, our sleep, the very way we
Hmm.
breathe. I
Mm.
remember noticing it when I first was like more and more on my phone, that I was breathing so shallow, like up in the top. I'm a yoga girly and a qigong facilitate and all these things. So I'm very aware of my body.
Of breath.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I just thought of all the many things in my life. The thing that's taken me most out of my body is being chronically online.
Mm.
Um, so I think somatic practice helps us notice where we've gone numb
Hmm.
and been captured, basically.
Wow.
So I think that whatever your practice is, the best practice of all, personally, I think, is just walking in nature.
Hmm.
That is the ideal. Just go outside, go for a walk. But whether it's, if you're into Qigong, yoga, whatever it is, meditation, embodied writing, all of these help us restore attention to our bodies. And then the body becomes the site of knowledge again. And I think this is actually the meaning of our lives, is to pay closer attention to what our dear body is trying to communicate
Tell
to us.
us.
And we know that if we don't, it'll start screaming. So so really
Mm. Yeah.
listen, listen deeply. And then through that embodied practice, you can create these small interruptions in the trance. So
Okay.
you can start. I'm not saying that it'll solve capitalism or racism or
Or
digital
the
extraction,
entire.
but I think it can restore your relational awareness. And I
Mm.
feel like that restores, your rhythmic kind of entangled being here. And I mean, this connects um, with cinema, of course, because cinema is also very somatic. It's a very affective medium, and it's
Hmm.
working. Vivian Sobchak did beautiful work on this. It's not just a visual medium.
Yes.
It works in this really primal way. It makes your hair stand on end,
Mm, it does.
when
It
it's
does.
good. And zombies definitely do that. So the body
They
is, I
definitely
think,
do
where we
that.
can begin to notice what has captured us.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Profound. Profound. Right. So there's a piece that you wrote on Substack, which I found quite interesting, called Black Magic. And you use Young's Red Book to arrive at a
Yes.
claim that I want us to sit with, since we're talking about, how our attention is being captured by our phones. So you write that the digital is not merely technological, but it's ontological, and that it changes what it means to be. So the phone is not just a device, but a living interface between psyche and system.
Yes.
What I want to ask is what that ontological claim means in embodied terms, because most people hold their phones as tools, as conveniences, as extensions. So, what's actually happening at the level of being when we pick up the device? And what kind of subjects are we in the act of scrolling? Zombies?
Such a, I love your questions. Listen, I think the smartphone has completely changed what it feels like to be a self.
Hmm.
And a la Afro-presentism, Nima
Mhm.
Gateri's data repair. I mean, I think what I enjoy about Afro-presentism is it isn't doom and gloom. There's some beautiful thinkers like Ruha Benjamin. She does such good work on the digital moment. Um, So when we say the digital is ontological,
Mhm.
we mean that it's changing our being, not just our
Yes.
behavior. And I really
Hmm.
believe this is true. So I feel like our phones are really shaping our desires, our memories, our most intimate selves. Obviously, our fears, our fantasies, the way we communicate very clearly has been altered. It's so intimate. It's next to our beds, it's in our hands, it's against our bodies almost all of the time. So it's so close, And I think that the act of scrolling is such an interesting thing. It's creating this loop of touch, image, reward. I mean, the greatest minds of our time have designed it to be utterly unputdownable. So we can't blame ourselves for being completely entranced. And then, of course, it also creates terrible fatigue. I'm sure it's not just me in midlife feeling this. And I think a thing that we mustn't forget is that it's so material. It's containing the actual minerals of our earth, coltan and the labor and the logistics and code and satellites, the platforms, all of these infrastructures, they are very embedded in the earth, as are we. So there's nothing abstract. It's not out there. It's not in the cloud. It's right here. It's infleshed, as are we. So it can zombify us for sure, because it obviously extracts our attention and our agency and our relation in many ways.
Yes,
I mean, I don't know about you, but it's definitely my primary relationship. And I'm not proud of that. I have a husband, I have children, I have a community, I have many students that I adore. But this phone is a very contested terrain. I mean, it connects us. It creates opportunities to witness. I mean, we've been on the front lines of all these horrific unfoldings. It helps us organize and teach and archive and create solidarities. But I think we've got to figure out, I feel like we're at a low point with it. And I think from now on, we're going to get a lot more aware of how to do this without completely surrendering to being captured. It's this very intimate infrastructure. And it's so new still, really. So we are the ones who've got to figure this out, how to do this better. Yeah.
Wow. And I just want to extend that question.
Yeah.
Because we also know that there has been the proliferation of artificial intelligence. And, it's also shaping the way that we think, the way that we write. How is that also impacting us on the level of being as well? I would say over-reliance on it.
Yeah. So maybe this is an opportunity to talk about consciousness.
Yes. Oh, please.
Because there's a lot of debate around, sentience and consciousness. And I mean, I see it as such a gift to get off our high horse and to decenter ourselves as the clever cookies we thought we were. We thought we were the ones, that we were the only ones who had the gift of language, and that was our great contribution to this planet, is that we could think very clever thoughts and do all these things that now LLMs can do effortlessly within instance and often much better than us. So I think being conscious can help us break the enchantment a little bit, the fantasy of innocence, and then ironically re-enchant us, because it is very enchanting, actually, to be here. I'm just staring out my window the whole time, just looking at the magnificence as the sun starts to set. So, I mean, mindfully being here doesn't undo all the devastation of cobalt mining, etc., labor exploitation, the toxic waste. We all know how heavy on water AI is, etc., and this is really a precious, precious resource. And there's been forced displacements and just so much violence. So obviously consciousness alone isn't going to change those kind of extractive supply chains. But it matters. because I think it helps us to realize that the device isn't neutral. And it's not, like I said, it's not in the cloud. It's not this weightless kind of like abstract thing. It appears smooth. It's very magical. It has this immaterial quality, but it's carrying our land and our blood, our data. What does that even mean? You know, the minerals and the labor and the pollution, the exhaustion. It's carrying it all.
Yes.
And I think consciousness can lead to some changed practices. Maybe how do we deal with the kind of built-in obsolescence? Like maybe we start to keep devices longer. We start to repair rather than replace. We start to ask about digital supply chains and, about procurement and yeah, just reject the clean fantasy. So, and remove that sort of alibi of neutrality or even of innocence that I think a lot of us still carry, even though I think less and less so, because I think the tech bros have really besmirched their names with the crazy stuff they've been saying and the megalomania, and then aligning themselves with fascist Trump and,
yes.
So I think no one's really under any delusions anymore. But now we've got to just learn how to do this differently and better. Yeah.
Wow. That is, I was going to ask you, what's the one thing that you would like us to take away from listening to this conversation? But I felt like this entire conversation has been a lot of things that we should take away. And it's been, so insightful and so delightful. And before I ended, I wanted to find out what you mean by working towards futures that glitch beautifully. I just love that phrasing. And I just want to know.
So it came actually out of my writing on Neptune Frost, which is a sort of this is interesting. This is how I found Afropresentism, was because everyone calls it an Afrofuturist musical set in Rwanda. But then Saul Williams said, why are you saying Afrofuturist? And he's like, I prefer Nima Gutierrez's term of Afropresentism, because he says, for many people, the worst has already happened. People living in Gaza, Sudan, the apocalypse is present day.
Yes, it is.
So, and that's kind of a direct quote from Saul Williams and his beautiful mind. But yeah, I when I was watching Neptune Frost over and over again and writing about it, it glitches, like it literally, the image glitches. And what happens is the character actually becomes the motherboard. And the code, it's a beautiful way of embodying code, because again, code isn't out there, it's material, And so I think there's a beautiful moment, I think it's right at the end of the film, so spoiler alert, where the motherboard is kind of glitching in between being here and being this sort of more immaterial on the cloud data thing. And I kind of feel like that's what's happening to all of us in the current moment, is we're somewhere in between at the moment. We are still embodied, but we're also chronically online. I think many of us are.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for everyone, but I know I am.
No, I am
so
as well.
we are kind of glitching between different states. And I think that there's a way to do that will be more healthy than it is at the moment, I hope. So basically, I'm trying to build a method, a pedagogy, and a practice, a lived practice of relational attention. And so I mentioned to you in our little pre-chat that I'm not averse to AI. I think that everything is here. And so we need to be in right relationship with everything that is in our world, and that includes AI. whether it was designed in right relationship or not is another question.
Yeah, we have
But
to be conscious enough to.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a tool that many of us are using. And so I think that, so this methodology that I've applied to reading certain films, this kind of elemental, indigenous way of knowing and rooted in new materialisms as well. I've been teaching out of it as well this year. And I've seen that it's maybe helping me and my students to think about images, but also about life as active, relational, political, embodied. It's not abstract. It's not metaphorical. It's, it's our actual experience of being here. So I think building these bridges between these different ways of thinking and being here helps us maybe to be here. Because I don't know about you, but I find being here quite hard.
It's very difficult. And as you mentioned, the weight of everything, the grief of the present moment, and the fact that we're living in the wake of the past and everything that has happened, it is very difficult to contend with, our life world.
So I think in like one sentence, what I would like people to carry forward, and myself included, is to often, if not always, ask, what relation are you inside of? And what is that relation asking of you? So I do a little exercise with my students where I say, consider the chair that you are currently sitting on, and consider all that's involved in that chair, its history, and all the relations that came together. And now consider how it supports you in the moment. And then just extend your awareness, and you'll just realize everything is here for everything else. Everything is here. It's so beautiful. It is truly a gift economy. Everything is here supporting everything else. And it's such a beautiful thing, just to feel that, to recognize like I am so supported in this moment. And so my role in this moment is also to be as supportive as possible.
Support as well.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know what to say. That's extremely beautiful, and we really appreciate those words of wisdom, and I hope that we can carry that through as well. But thank you so much for the fascinating conversation. This has been such a pleasure.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. It was everything and more than I was expecting.
Oh, wow. I'm really glad you did. Unfortunately, my camera is not functioning, so you can't see me.
I know, but I can hear you at least, and you've got a gorgeous voice. Listen, this book I wanted to mention, I don't know if you've read it yet, The Journey Kwantu.
No, I haven't.
I picked it up at the Cape Town Open Book Festival, where I was launching my own book, by the way, called Burning Down the House. I should punt it as well. Okay. So funny, I don't have that at hand. Oh, actually, it's at the plinth for my laptop, so let me grab it. This is my book, Burning Down the House, which is a labor of love in collaboration with students. Yeah, so this beautiful book, The Journey Kwantu, we need more of this, which is... comes from a place of, comes from the wound, and then wanting to do that difficult work of unearthing the archive within, Very, very beautiful work. Can recommend.
Right. I'm definitely going to get myself a copy.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really look forward to chatting again sometime, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much for, availing yourself and for sharing your wisdom. And I wish you all the best. And I can't wait to speak to you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mpundo.
All right. Cheers. Goodbye, Cherise.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.